More empty promises. How many times have we heard the same song being sung before? How many times will we hear about specialized GBV courts, about specialized commissions to prosecute those state capture accused? How many more times do we need to hear the same thing from President Cyril Ramaphosa? I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. You promised to fix the railway systems before. Now you're telling us that you're going to fix all of Prasa signaling problems, but millions of South Africans can't make it to work on time using our rail network. You've promised us an end to load shedding, right? But last weekend we had 2 days of power cuts after a relatively long power cut free streak. But we've heard this all before. You've promised an end to load shedding before. My advice, Cyril, don't bother with the SONA next year. Don't bother with the State of the Nation. The State of the Nation is bad. So I tell you what, right? Rather than put things in place to fix those things, let South Africans feel the change. Let them experience your government making things work for them, improve their lives, and then come and talk to us. If you're not going to do that next year with SONA, don't bother.
We need to talk about President Ramaphosa's 2025 State of the Nation address. 70 years since the Freedom Charter was adopted, the President says we are building a South Africa that works for all. But let's be honest, who is it really working for? The speech spoke of unity, economic growth, and a thriving democracy. But millions of South Africans, these words feel empty. Load shedding might have eased, yes, but power remains in the hands of the few. Service delivery has collapsed in municipalities across the country. Corruption still runs deep, and the cost of living is higher than ever. We're told about a government of national unity. But what about unity between government and the people? What about promises made to those still waiting for jobs, for housing, for dignity? The Freedom Charter said the people shall govern, yet 30 years into democracy, people feel more powerless. The speech acknowledged our many struggles: poverty, unemployment, gender-based violence. But where was the real accountability in the speech? The Freedom Charter envisioned a South Africa where the wealth is shared among all. But today, the gap between the rich and the poor is wider than ever. So we must ask, is this a government that delivers or one that simply manages decline? How many more plans, dialogues, and promises will we get before we see real change? The President says we are working to build a nation that works for all. But 30 years later, are we just building or are we just talking?
This is what we've achieved. We promised you growth, we promised you jobs, we promised you infrastructure, we promised you lower household expenses. And these are the deadlines that we're going to hold ourselves to. We can't be sitting at the 2029 election, going to an election with some of these projects still languishing on the drawing board, etc. So I think that now we're going to have to unpack how we take all of these things and move them with speed and urgency going forward. And the DA stands ready to use our portfolios and to use the expertise that we've gained at municipal and provincial level to assist government to be able to drive with urgency these particular issues going forward. I think that it is wrong for our SANDF members to be exposed to risk in the way that they have been in the DRC. There's been terrible allegations of undersupply, and I think that we need to make sure that we're able to address this. We're there as part of the SADC mission in terms of the peacekeeping mission, and I think that we need to, before we just simply withdraw, we're going to have some conversations with the SADC about how we manage these going forward. If South Africa is going to be involved in peacekeeping missions, we need to understand why we're there, what we're there to do, and how we intend to do it, and how we're going to equip our soldiers to do it. I really express my deepest sympathies to the families of those soldiers who lost their lives in the DRC, and I certainly am hoping that we're able to use this opportunity to ensure that something of this nature never happens again.
To be seen. It's all very well in a public platform like this to say I'm not going to be bullied, but then he does something quite the opposite. It remains to be seen, but I don't trust much of what he said, to be frank.
He also mentioned that he's going to continue to support Palestine. So what do you want to say?
Well, as the MK party, we welcome any suggestion in terms of supporting Palestinian issue. It's very close to our hearts. The problem that Mr. Ramaphosa has is the so-called government of national unity. Because in terms of foreign policy of the DA is a central partner in the government of national unity. The foreign policies differ. There are foreign policies, particularly in respect of Palestine, are irreconcilable. That's why there is no clear-cut or decisive policy on the issue of Palestine.
Agreed to implement around HIV and AIDS as a state from the coffers of the state. We emphasize our position in terms of foreign policy that defines South Africa's principal position, which is one, multilateralism. We don't act alone, we work with others. In that context, we promote peace and working with other nations. And then what we are doing in relation to Ukraine and Russia, and working with others again in terms of finding a peaceful solution. But over and above that, an emphasis on the question of solidarity, Palestine, and guaranteeing and working for the self-determination of the Palestinian people is very key to what defines our principled foreign policy in relation to solidarity work.
If you are battling with SRD funding relative to other expansionary infrastructural issues, so we have no money to do that. And then lastly, I do think that we need to eradicate corruption. What destroys local government is the fact that there are many people who are working there who are corrupt, and we're refusing to deal with them. The more of those people stay at local government, the more we can review the white paper, but we'll never be able to finance it.
Any thoughts on the NHI?
NHI is part of our commitment, but the broader issue about expanding NHI is about financing it. And as things stand at the moment, much of the health budget is being eaten up by medical legal cases, and more crucially about the fact that hospitals, particularly hospital management, is often poor in many places.
I think the speech was optimistic and hopeful, and out of the 8 or 9 that he's delivered, probably the most detailed in terms of the economic recovery and how we achieve it, how we are addressing the obstacles to economic growth in our country. And so the strong focus on the economy was really welcome, and the detail in which he unpacked the different sectors that would play a role in growing the economy and what the obstacles were to those sectors contributing to economic growth and how they were going to remove those obstacles was really encouraging. So I left the SONA feeling very optimistic and hopeful. I think if there was a criticism or disappointment around the economic growth part, is that the objective of achieving 3% growth is not going to be sufficient to address unemployment meaningfully. Most economists have said that you need at least 5% economic growth in South Africa to meaningfully reduce unemployment. Of course, the social relief of distress grant, he made a commitment that is not going to be removed. It's going to be the foundation of some other kind of social assistance, but he couldn't bring himself to say, I'm going to introduce a basic income grant. And I think South Africans who are concerned around poverty have been waiting for the president to say that we are going to introduce a basic income grant. So that was a disappointment. The focus on foreign policy was important as well, given events in the recent weeks. So overall, I'm really encouraged by the SONA. I think it's certainly one of its most comprehensive. It was broad. It covered many components of being in government, and in the end, it actually articulated the Government of National Unity statement of intent. So he delivered a coalition government's SONA tonight.
As the ATM, we are not moved by tonight's SONA, precisely because SONA is about the people. As much as the president can speak and the people that support him will say he's made the best speech, but we need to ask hard questions, and the biggest question we need to ask is to say, what is the state of our country? What are the people in the villages, in the townships saying about the state of the country? Are they happy living in poverty, in unemployment, or they've basically given up? They do not even have hope. They do not even watch SONAs, because SONAs have become the very same thing whereby they're going to have promises, hear promises, get hope, but nothing happens, nothing tangible happens. So that is why we as the ATM were not excited about tonight's SONA, and next week when you debate, we are going to offer our solutions as to what should be done, because the pressing issues such as poverty, unemployment, and ensuring that there is power supply are very, very critical to move the country forward.
It's a disaster. He talks about local municipalities. All he's doing is he's privatizing water and electricity. He's setting up entities, and we mentioned this actually in Parliament, because we could see there's another way of privatizing water, privatizing electricity, and then so-called introducing grants to fund these initiatives. Meanwhile, these are actually loans that are coming from IMF and World Bank. He talks about network industries and the recovery thereof. No, all those network industries, by the way, are burdened by the same loans that we've been getting from the IMF. If you look at the cost of electricity, I mean, you could get close to 80 kilowatts for 100 rand. Today, you get 25 kilowatts for 100 rand. You know why? Part of it, it's ESCOM, it's a network industry. It's funded by the same IMF. So this man has got no clue. The sooner this man steps down, the better for all South Africans. Because
linchpin for digital transformation of government in South Africa, because we're the custodian of identity, and the identity, the ability to know that someone is who they say they are, is really the key thing you need to unlock the ability for people to access services digitally. So that's why the digital ID component is so important, as announced by the President. It will also have other benefits, in addition, of course, to making it possible for you to obtain government services online. It will also deal with fraud and corruption that we see in the identity space, because at the moment the problem we have is that when processes are manual, you have the space for human interference in those processes. The other thing that's really important is, of course, on the visa side. The President spoke about the electronic travel authorization and really a drive from our side to automate the visa process. Again, two real big benefits. The first one, corruption, fraud. You know, when you have paper-based, handwritten visas, that's open to human manipulation. But an online system where you use AI and machine learning, which is all doable in the year 2025, you really close that avenue for corruption off. But just as importantly, you also make it far easier for tourists to actually obtain these documents. You don't have to go to a mission somewhere, far away from where you live. And all of this together is really what we mean when we say we want to deliver home affairs at home.
Everything was rotten. I was dreaming.
In the middle of
Any speech was saying there's a dream. It's an empty promise to our people. He's lying about in Congo. What is happening there?
About the schools.
Schools, hospitals. Most of the hospitals, they don't have water. He's lying. He never named where they're going to build a school because he's lying. Yes.
What did you hope to get?
We hope to get the truth, because what he was saying that was lying. Because the truth, people are suffering there. There is no jobs. Look now, we have 500,000 schools who have to be admitted by the university. Only few, the majority, they are staying back at home. Where the school? Why we are pushing our children to go to school? But they are sitting with the best certificate. They never have a chance to go to university this year. And the next year, most of them, they'll be in trouble, our children. He was lying. It's because the people who give him a speech, they mislead him. Yeah, I hate.
And so the issue becomes, you're listening to the president seemingly move from the reality of South Africa and South Africa. You're hearing the president who is not able to state the real state of the nation and therefore doesn't have a sense of urgency about what he's saying. We're hearing rehashed plans and no accountability for the previous promises. So for example, he mentioned development of women in the economy a lot, repeatedly. But there's a commitment that stands to be able to have 40% of public procurement be for women, and we actually have not seen that happen.
Also, he speaks about we want a country where nobody's poor. Well, the majority of our country is living below the breadline.
The majority of our country is living below the poverty line, and the reality here is that he speaks of a growth, a target of 3%. Now, we cannot, in South Africa, have economic growth. We cannot create jobs, we cannot create employment at 3%. We need at least 5 to 6%.
Abazilutongati bonke labantu bayafanisela ngathi bonke labantu basifake lipressure ukuthi abasi sivelaphi na. Oh, ingalesi isambile emkhathini nelanga lisaphume Mpumalanga nesingane zilala zidlile okushuku